Shalom, Israel, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all honor and glory to Yahweh by Shemi Hawashai. In this video, going to be short and sweet. I'm actually going to get into Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36 on down. Mainly going into the topic of the two greatest commandments. Right? So a lot of Christians, they read this verse and they be like, see, we don't have to keep the law no more. We don't have to keep the 10 Commandments, or they be like, we don't have to keep those laws that's in the Old Testament. We only got to keep 2 laws. That's what a lot of people say. A lot of people, don't really get the true understanding of Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36 on down, going into these 2 commandments. But they don't understand, why did Yahweh Shai, or who the world calls Jesus Christ, why did he say only 2 commandments? If we know that there's more commandments that we got to keep, why did he only say 2? We're going to break it down through the Spirit. And Lord willing, be clearer and more understanding to brothers and sisters that didn't have an understanding. So this is what our job is as prophets, as messengers of the Lord, as servants of the Lord. Our job is to make things clear for our people, man. Because we come out of Christianity, we come out of Islam, things like that. We all confused, our head all messed up. Christians, we come from the church, so we get into these scriptures and we kind of dibble and dabble with certain scriptures, certain precepts. So we're finna have an understanding, Lord willing, of Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36. And let's see, why did he only say 2 commandments? Why did he say these 2 commandments? All right, so this is the book of Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Right, so they asking him, right? The Pharisees, if I'm mistaken, that was the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Hold up. Yeah, the Pharisees and the Sadducees are asking Yahweh Shai, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? So they want to know, what's the greatest commandment in the law? So he said in verse 37, Yahweh Shai said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy mind. This is the first and great commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So I want y'all to really think about this. They asked him, which is the great commandment, and which is the great commandment in the law. So they wasn't asking the only commandment that we got to keep. They was basically asking, what's the great commandment in the law? So he basically answered, when you go down to verse 39 verse 40, on these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So Christ is not saying these the only 2 commandments. Like, you don't got to keep the dietary law no more. You don't got to keep the Sabbath day no more. You ain't got to wear your fringes no more. He's not saying that. He's not saying those laws are done away with, because we know how we know that, because Christ kept the law. He didn't come back to destroy the law. This is Matthew 5 and 17. Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. So he said, don't think that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. So that means the law is in full effect. What law is he talking about? The law in the Old Testament. That's what all the laws at, man. The laws that we got to keep are in the Torah. So what did he mean by he didn't come to destroy but to fulfill? What did he come to fulfill? Let's see what he talking about when he said he came to fulfill. Let's see what he was talking about. It's the book of Luke, chapter 24, and I want to say it's 44. And he said unto them, These are the words which I spake unto you while I was yet with you, that all things must be fulfilled which were written in the law of Moses and in the prophets in the Psalms concerning me. So he came to fulfill those prophecies that was that was spoken about of him. Because even Yahweh Shai, he was spoke about in the Old Testament. Lord will I could do a video breaking down Christ in the Old Testament. He been spoke about in the Old Testament. Brothers been prophesying the coming of the Messiah in the Old Testament. So he's been spoken about. So he came on this earth to fulfill those things that was talked about of him by the prophets. So when you go back to Matthew 22, because people don't, people think that you only got to keep the 10. People think that you don't got to keep the 10. You don't got to keep the 613. You don't got to keep none of that. Let's see. Let me read it again. Matthew chapter 22 and verse 36. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? Yahushua said unto him, Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. So this is the first and great commandment, and the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. On these two commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So the reason why, I'm going to show y'all something. It's like it. Let me show y'all something. The reason why he said those two commandments, because like he said, those two commandments hang the whole law. The whole law, if you think about our law, the whole law, even the 10 commandments, is going into loving the Most High God and loving your neighbor. Because if you love the Most High God with all your heart, with all your soul, you would keep those laws that he spoke about. Right? You would keep what he said. You wouldn't eat pork because you love the Most High God. You know what I'm saying? You wouldn't bow down to no idols because you love the Most High God. You would keep his commandments. You would keep the Sabbath day. Why? Because you love the Most High God. You would keep his high holy days. Why? Because you love the Most High God. So that first commandment hang the law. And then he said, the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So if you love your neighbor as yourself, you wouldn't covet. You wouldn't steal from him. You wouldn't sleep with his wife. Right? You won't have an evil eye towards him. And that hang the whole law right there. These two commandments hang the whole law. And I'm going to show you that these two commandments alone hang all the 10 commandments. They hang all the 10 commandments. So these are not the only 2 commandments that you have to keep. They just hang. He basically, because Yahushua wasn't just going to sit there and tell them, break down all the laws to them. It would have been there all day. So he basically gave them a shorter version by answering them with the 2 greatest commandments, because with these 2 great commandments sum up the whole law. So let me show you something. Let me show you how they sum up even the 10 commandments that our people have in the church. They had the 10 commandments sometime in their house. But let me show you how they sum up. They sum them up. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 3. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So what category does that fall under? Loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul. Because if you love the Lord thy God with your whole heart and your soul, you wouldn't have no other gods before him. Verse 4. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images or any likeness of anything that is heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the waters under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them, for I am the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation of them that hate thee. So what this fall under? The same thing. Because if you love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, right, you wouldn't make no graven images to bow down to. You wouldn't have no idols set up. So that falls under, loving the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul. I'm going to go down to verse 7. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. So if you love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, you wouldn't take the name of the Lord in vain. You see how these two commandments that he gave, that Christ said, they really summing up the whole law. Literally. He said, verse 8, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them. All that in them is, my bad, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath and hallowed it. So if you truly love the Lord thy God with all your heart and with all your soul, you would keep the Sabbath day holy. You would rest on the Sabbath day. So that's showing the Most High God that you love Him by you keeping these commandments. And that's all of these right now that I just read is falling under that. Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. Because if you love the Lord thy God strongly, you would do these things, or you wouldn't do these things. You wouldn't have idols set up, and you wouldn't be bowing down to them, or you wouldn't, or you would keep the Sabbath day holy. You know, you would keep it holy and keep the Sabbath because you truly love the Lord. Because the Lord kept the Sabbath day, right? So now we finna get into the love thy neighbor as thyself, which is the second one that he said to show you that those two commandments hang the whole law. Check this out. Verse 12. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. So if you love your neighbor, right? So if you love your neighbor as yourself, you would respect your parents. You will respect your parents, man. You will honor them. You will love them. You wouldn't mistreat them or talk bad to them because you love them. You love your neighbor and you love the Most High God. And you love the Most High God. So verse 13, thou shalt not kill. So the Bible said, you won't kill. So if your brother came to you and make you upset, you're not going to kill him. Why? Because you love your neighbor as thyself. You love him. You ain't going to go and just murder your brothers like our people doing in the so-called black and Hispanic community. Killing each other for no reason. Right? Hating each other, having an evil eye. We're not keeping that second great commandment. If we would keep it, we wouldn't be killing each other. Verse 14, thou shalt not commit adultery. That commandment fall under loving thy neighbor as thyself. Because if I love my neighbor as I love myself, I wouldn't lay with his wife. I wouldn't sit at a table and chat with his wife while everybody else gone. I wouldn't do that. Because I love my brother as I love myself. Verse 15, thou shalt not steal. So if I love my neighbor as I love myself, like I love myself, I wouldn't steal from him. I wouldn't steal his phone. I wouldn't steal his wallet. I wouldn't steal anything that my brother that belongs to my brother because I love him as I love myself. I wouldn't want nobody stealing from me, so I'm not going to steal from my brother. You see how now we see how Christ did this thing, how he said these two commandments to make it easy, that he basically summed up the whole law. He's not saying, I only got to do these two commandments and I'm good. No, you got to do all the commandments. You gotta do all these commandments, man, right? But these two commandments that he said, it sums up the law in a nutshell. It sums it up. See that, and that's the precept they go to. No, I can eat it. I can eat whatever I want. I can eat pork. I don't gotta keep the Sabbath day because Christ only said two commandments. If I love him with all my heart and all my soul and love my brother as I love myself, I'm good. But people don't understand what they're saying. If you love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul, you would keep the Sabbath day. You would keep the Sabbath day. If you love the Lord thy God with all your heart and with all your soul, you would stop eating pork, crab leg, shrimp, and lobster because the Lord told you in Leviticus chapter 11 and 7 on down not to eat those things. So that's showing that you love the Lord thy God with all your heart and all your soul. So you actually keeping that great commandment. But our people like, nah, because they don't have no understanding. And, verse 16, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor. So if I love my neighbor as I love myself, I'm not going to bear false witness on my brother or my sister. I'm not going to say they did something and I seen them do something and they didn't do it. I'm not going to bear false witness. Why? Because I'm keeping this second and this first, these great commandments that he said to the Pharisees and scribes. Sadducees and Pharisees. Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul. My bad. Yeah, love the Lord thy heart, love the God with all your heart, with all your soul, and love your neighbors, you love yourself. If I'm keeping these 2 commandments, I'm keeping the law. I'm going to keep the law automatically if I'm keeping these 2 commandments. You should anyway. But like I said, people make an excuse to be like, I just got to keep these 2 commandments. And I'm straight. But not knowing that he's summing up the whole law in a nutshell with these 2 commandments. He's not saying you only got to do these and that's it. He's not saying you could be a homosexual now. People say that I could be a homosexual now because Christ said he ain't say nothing about the 10 commandments or the rest of the commandments. He said I only got to keep 2 commandments. So I can be a homosexual. I can be a drag queen now. I can date whoever I want to date. He's not saying that, man. This is the law summed up in a nutshell. Verse 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's. So if I love my brother, if I love my sister, I'm not going to covet nothing they got. I'm not going to envy and try to and plot on how to take their stuff. I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I'm keeping the first and second greatest commandments. Love thy neighbor as thyself, and love the Lord thy God with all your heart, with all your soul. That hangs the whole law. That's why he said in verse 40, on these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. It hangs everything, even outside the 10. When you just getting into the Torah, but I'm talking about like when it's going into the dietary law, when it's going to your dress code, the high holy days, just those days, how to treat your brother, how to treat your sister. You know what I'm saying? The law of when the women's unclean. So this going into everything because these 2 commandments is the law, and like I keep saying, it's the whole law in a nutshell, man. We got to realize that. So we still got to keep the law. Our people trying to run away from keeping the law, man. No, we still got to keep the law. What Christ was saying was, why he only said these 2, he didn't have to say the whole law. The Pharisees and Sadducees, they already knew anyway. They just want to pick his brain. So he wasn't finna just sit there and talk to them like they didn't know. They already knew. So he just said the 2. He said those 2 greatest commandments. He said those 2 to basically sum the whole law up. So he wouldn't have to say all of them. Because and even in the first place, they really didn't ask for all the laws. They really didn't say what's all the laws, or what's the most. How many? They ain't whatever. They didn't ask all that. They just asked, verse 36. Master, which is the great commandment in the law? So they asking, what's the greatest commandment? Basically, what's the greatest commandment? They didn't ask what's the commandments that we gotta keep, or what's the only commandments that we gotta keep. They didn't ask that. They just asking what's the greatest commandment. So why do people act like these the only ones that we gotta keep? Christ wasn't answering this question as these the only ones we got to keep. He was just saying the greatest ones, the greatest commandments, the 2 greatest commandments. He wasn't saying these the only ones that we got to keep now. People try to say that. People try to come to him and be like, "Why? See, Christ was saying these the only 2 commandments that we got to keep now." He was never answering that question like that. He was saying what's the greatest commandments? And he answered it mightily. He answered it so mighty, man, because he's smart. He's smart. He said the 2 greatest commandments, and those 2 commandments sum the whole law. Simple as that. So Lord willing, I want to give all honor and glory to Yahweh Shimi Awashai. Lord willing, this video is edifying the brothers and sisters, and Lord willing, they got a better understanding with this, man. Israel, keep enduring, keep rising up when the last days. Repent, keep the commandments, keep fasting, keep praying, and don't lose faith, and keep watching. Shalom.